And I think this is very useful for younger writers here. I get this question all the time. How much research do you do? How do you use it? And I think it would be interesting for them to hear about like what research you did, because I recognize aspects of it, and what you chose and what you didn't use. Yeah.
So for me, I think because the novel was so personal and because it was rooted so much in memory, a lot of it just kind of flowed from my own personal experiences.
Yeah.
And you know, if you look at the stories, I can think of very few stories that highlight the Indian Kenyan experience.
Yeah.
Which is also why when I read Dance of the Jacaranda, it did make me feel very heard and understood, and it gave me actually better insight into our history.
Yeah.
So in terms of writing about that community, the research that I did was speak to people within the community, speak to my grandparents, speak to my parents, try and understand and learn from them. In terms of, you know, creating this world that is Nairobi, a lot of research didn't necessarily need to go into it because I really just spoke from my own experiences.
There's that excellent moment where Pio Gama Pinto appears.
Yeah.
Did you have to, or do you already know him from just family accounts, etc.?
I mean, there's quite a bit written about Pio
Yeah.
Gama Pinto. I think he is one of the more prominent Indian Kenyan figures.
Yeah.
And I really did want to give him a space within that book because he is so important.
Yeah.
But like I said, you know, we can count on our hands the number of Indian Kenyan figures that are talked about. So really for me it was more about just listening to stories from people who remembered things and from those memories.
Yeah. And the cops, like how they learn how to operate.
Yeah, so I did a bit, I mean, I did a bit of reading and you know, you read things online and then you, like Peter is saying, you kind of just take those facts and then run with it and then use your imagination to make it into something bigger. So with Jeffrey, of course, I've had experiences with policemen like that. The you know, being in that police station and having a policeman not pay attention to me and make things much harder for me, it's something that I have lived. So so the book really came down to a lot of personal experiences.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Peter?
Right. I recognize it's possible to research on a book for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Because when do you know enough?
A lot of people fall victim. A lot of people fall victim to that.
Yes. So I have understood now as I refine my own approach to writing. At times, what I seek to understand are fragments of things about that moment, because I'm also leaving room for my own imagination. The constraint of researching endlessly is that there'll be something you don't know. Even when you finish, you'll be saying, I still don't understand this and that. So I restrain by saying, I am not a historian, I'm a fiction writer. My work is to invent. So what I seek to understand in a moment, say like when I was researching 1890s Kenya, what kind of dressing did people have? What kind of language was applied at that time? What were the tiny elements of life that will make my story authentic? But these characters, just by observing, you know, people of certain generations, you get certain attitudes to filter somehow. So I tend to think about the difference between a historian and a creative writer. That a historian is going to amass, think about this as an archive, store this space up with material, then chisel out a shape or form that speaks to the material. For me, as a creative writer who is interested in historical fiction, all I need to get is a sentence or a picture. So like my current work has been shipped around a single image from the 1990s Kenya that defines Nairobi for me. And I'm working towards this image, creating a whole community surrounding it. So, of course, there'll be a news bulletin that maybe highlights something about that period, and I pay attention to that. And then I see, I didn't know quite about this. But I can say my research is incremental. It is as per need, but I don't anymore hide away in archives, reading when I should be breathing some fresh air, having a cup of tea, having a chat with friends, and observing people and picking elements of feature characters.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I found the moments of nyama choma roasting in colonial times quite fascinating in terms of how they used to do it. I think there were just moments I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Is that how they used to do it in the 1900s? Yeah, yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yes. Questions, thoughts, comments, reactions?
My name is John Sibi Okumu. Maybe we can have conversations that we have in private in a public space. And I'm just interested on a comment from the panelists. Billy used to set the ball rolling by talking about novelizing history. And I just wonder to what extent you as writers make the conscious decision to be propagandists, not in a negative way, but propagandists trying to spread a message. I wonder if I phrased that correctly. Do you want us to go away as if we've gone from church with some kind of lesson to guide us through life? Do you want us to interrogate what you've said and change our minds about certain things like nationality and tribalism? If you spend 8 years of your life doing something, what are you trying to achieve?
Thank you, John. I can say, indeed, when I write a story of any kind, there is an implied message one is trying to convey. And this could be as simple as, are we thinking about what our leaders are telling us, or what our teachers are saying, or what the weather men and women are saying? I do have an implied message, but that message is not even secondary. It's submerged in the story because I believe one has to enjoy the story. So I think about storylines and my characters, because the storyline has to be so powerful to be able to bear the weight of the message. If you're going to bombard people with certain slogans, you become a sloganeer. I try to be a novelist. So let's expand your question a little further and say, can I, as a Kenyan writer, who bear certain scars from our 60 years of independence, 70 years of British occupation, is my citizenship of this world somewhat burdened by certain coincidences of history that I am seeking to perhaps correct or to challenge or to subvert? Whatever it is that I'm doing from a writer's artistic interests, I think what our forebears, Kina Achebe, Ngugi, and others, that generation of writers, they were saying, our continent bears so much pain, we must retell our past, take away the pain, and somehow give people something to celebrate about. So what I strive to do consciously is to give people a story they can enjoy, because once you enjoy, the rest of the messages will settle in quietly. That's how I approach it.
So I think in that way, Peter, you and I are quite different, because I don't try to give people a story that they enjoy. I think the stories that I love are the really difficult and the really hard ones, the ones that focus on issues that we would rather ignore. And so that's, the wonderful thing about storytelling, and I think the novel in particular, because we've talked about how many layers it can actually have, is that it will take you into this very complex topic and then turn everything on its head. So you think you believe something 100%, and after coming out of that novel, your perception of that will have changed. So I definitely, for whatever I'm writing, I am trying to go in, number one, for myself to understand this topic from a different point of view, to grow myself as a person, and then I hope that that kind of extends outwards to people who, and I've had people who have read Who Will Catch Us As We Fall, especially within the community, who, they read it and it's like holding a mirror up to themselves. And it's difficult, and it requires a lot of truth-telling and a lot of honesty. But from that, you come out as someone who is more understanding and who's better. So I do think, I wouldn't say it's proper, I wouldn't compare it to propaganda, because propaganda is loud and it's in your face. But a novel, like you said, can be gentle, and it can really give us a more opening and a welcoming space within which we can sit with those uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, yeah.
And may I interject briefly and say, when you read Dance of the Jacaranda, it's a difficult period of our past. Absolutely. Things that have been under the carpet. So what I meant was, for my readers to get the message, they must first enjoy the story. So, but I write about difficult scenarios too.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, I think it just depends a lot on the medium. I think the stuff I've worked on, I think when we were working on, say, Nairobi Half-Life, we were like, we know what Nairobi is like. A certain kind of Nairobi is like, but we were very interested in kind of humanizing and trying to kind of show what that Nairobi is like. And we are very, very aware that character is what does that, I think. I think when I was writing, which is a film medium, when I wrote the true story of David Munyakei, which was basically taking on Goldenberg and corruption, it was very much the main character, David Munyakei, was enough. Just his life was enough. I didn't need to do anything else. I just needed to show his life as in the most interesting way as possible. And I think whatever messaging the reader took would come through. In my collection, I had a very firm idea about what my youth in Kenya was like, and how surviving that was really about going through a series of failures. And my idea was that failure is not necessarily a bad thing if it doesn't end up in real tragedy. It's really about stuff that makes you stronger, for want of a better phrase. And I was and when I was younger, I observed a lot of these things. And so I was, at the back of my head, it's really about failure is not necessarily a bad thing if you can kind of overcome it, but through characters and settings. Because I think it's also knowing your audience quite well and understanding that you as a writer and the audience, that your implied audience complete the work. So you're hoping the reader brings a lot into it for whatever you want to say to come through. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Amy Ruto, and I also want to be a novelist. So in writing, I usually find that, especially in the Kenyan readership, there are some ideas and some thoughts that may not be taken positively or may not be accepted. And those are the ideas I find myself writing about a lot. And so there's this point where, as a writer, of course you want to be read, and especially you want to be read by the people around you. So how do you navigate, or have there been instances where you find yourself censoring yourself so that maybe your book can be published, or it can even be discussed? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
I think as a writer, it can be you make the process a lot more difficult for yourself if when you're writing, you're thinking about who you're writing for and what people might say about it and if people will be offended by it. So for my first novel, actually, it does focus on the topic of pedophilia. And that was a very difficult, a very sensitive topic to write about. And I remember during my because I wrote it when I was doing my master's. And so we would have these classes where we would sit and we would read each other's work. And, everybody kind of told me, don't touch that. You shouldn't go that far. And really, actually, what it made me want to do was go even further, because I knew that's the story I wanted to tell. I knew that story was important to me. So when I write, I really try and put all of the rest. Will it get published? Will people like it? Will people say something bad about it? I put all of that to the side, and I just concentrate on writing the story. Because, as a writer, you have to understand that your power comes from your unique voice, from your unique story. And when you start putting all of those other things into the mix, it makes it a lot more difficult.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Could I ask, how old are you? 23. 23. So at 23, you're already imprisoned by societal dictates. so if I thought there's a certain age when writers don't really care about what the rest of the world thinks. I am definitely coming to a point of that stage of my writing when I don't really care what I'm writing, what I feel is important. And when you want to imagine, just think about that question deeply. What do they really want you to write? You don't ask for permission from anyone, do you? So how do you know they're not likely to be receptive to a certain type of story? How? We can say our work as writers is not to comfort society, is to make them uncomfortable by saying the unsayable. That's what Iman is saying. So if you approach your writing at this stage with fear and trepidation, and you're paralyzed by this fear, just know then you're not going to write what you see as your vision of the world. Remember, that's what writers do. What you're sharing in a poem, in a play, in a dance, in a novel, it's your vision of the world. So if that's not coming through because you're afraid of what people will say about it, then you'll never get to do anything. So you need to break those artificial structures in your mind and just write about what you really care about. And you'll find it will be liberating. And who knows, maybe that's a story the world is waiting to read from you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter. And I always, I think audiences and readers are so sophisticated. Like, when you think you're pleasing anyone, you're just boring them. And I must say, reading these two novels, I just admire how unflinching and honest you are, actually, on the relationship between the characters of different backgrounds. I was like, yes. And Peter, I must say that just kind of really, really taking on things that, of course, history can't take on. Just what happens between Sally and MacDonald, right? The whole thing with, that is really the way that I think, we should be doing it. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Odhiambo Kauma, and I must say that I've enjoyed the conversation today. Thank you, Peter, Iman, and Billy, for the great moderation. I may be developing on that question about independence, thinking as a writer, and not being afraid of what you get outside there. I think a reaction to that, especially when it comes to censorship through, the Kenyan let me say the Kenyan context, where we have all these books written for schools and school-going children and all that. It's always a living fear in any writer, because internally, when you do not get external acclaims, you would want your book to be somewhere in the hands of a teen in high school or somewhere. And that really restricts you a lot. You want to tell the story of such a perfect society, and sometimes even editors from there will tell you this is not something we would want to publish. And a reaction to that is actually a very aggressive generation of self-published independent writers, and you get outside here, you'll find hundreds of titles, Billy, that perhaps you did not live here during your time. And Peter, what is your reaction to this? Are you aware of this new society, this new generation, and what do you think of it? What has produced it, and what is its future? Now that we're talking about past, present, and beyond, what is there for this generation of writers? Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. I am aware, of course, that we have you might call it the underground movement that seems to be shifting the landscape. Young Kenyan writers are getting all manner of work out there, and they're promoting them on social media, and there is a whole ecosystem that maybe Zakayo doesn't know. He might start taxing these books, but there's a whole ecosystem where we are actually tapping into. I mean, my book is published in Nairobi by Jahazi, and it's part of that ecosystem that's moving these books. We might be published in London or New York, but the bulk of our readers are in Kenya, and they are being circulated too by these networks. So my response to the censorship about what kind of texts are being read in school amplifies the kind of hypocrisy and puritanism that has really hampered our progress as a society. Because I was telling my other book club members a week ago, I don't write with 4 elderly men sitting at Moranga Road in mind. I don't write for them. I write for the critical mass in Kenya, including this audience. So because they're fixated, it's become almost like a national affliction. Every publisher in this town is saying, I want to publish text that are going to be endorsed by KICD, the Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development. Because obviously there is a huge market, but this is almost like a cartel of sorts. It's entrepreneurship in creativity. One is looking at one sale, and your company is afloat for 10 or 15 years because of the kind of profits you're making in. But these publishers are not interested in investing in nurturing writers in the first place, leave alone about them writing good works that get to be endorsed by the government. How do you harvest before you plant or cultivate a reading and writing tradition? So those are the constraints I am writing away from. I am writing stories that I hope will be read and appreciated anywhere in the world. Should it find its way once upon a time, when those men are long dead, perhaps a newer generation of reviewers are with a different mindset? I don't write with KICD in mind, let me just say in short. That's not to say we do not minimize the harm they are occasioning Kenyan children by not getting to access content that's being published about contemporary issues that they are facing in Kenya today. I would like to see similar zeal in protecting the internet, the kind of trash they permit, the kind of insidious harm that's being orchestrated online, because the same censorship is not being applied to actually sieve a lot of harmful content. We are becoming what the pit latrine that Aikwa Iyama wrote about. It can't refuse even dysentery.
So I think, going the traditional publishing route in Kenya has always been very difficult. Of course, you have certain stories that they want to tell. Other stories, if you do have them, they're very difficult to get out there. I think what I'm noticing more since I wrote the novel in these past few years, that there are so many more avenues for us now to publish our stories and tell the stories that we want. Whether that is through self-publishing, there's a big rise in self-publishing, which I think is great because you really are not accountable to anybody. You can say what you want, you can tell the story that you want, and I think that's a really wonderful way that we're going. But even if you look within the creative space, we forget about actually publishing the story. This community has become so strong. It's become so loud. We have a lot of support. So even within the community, just to be able to share our stories and tell our stories, it has become something that, it's grown to something so much larger than I ever thought that it would. In terms of censorship, I think it's, if I'm being honest, it'll probably get worse. We just, as writers, have to know what avenues we can use and that we have the support of each other to keep writing the stories that we want to write.
Yeah, I think Peter has covered the school texts and just all that hypocrisy. Like those kids must be wondering, what is this? Just imagine. Like the access of information they have and anything. And now you're forcing these texts. I just think the underground stuff is incredible. I think it's amazing. It's incredible. I think, like all great literatures, that kind of aspect is very, very important. And I just like the fact that you're just not even asking for my permission, because you shouldn't. You should just do your thing. Because no one will tell you a story. You just have to force your way. That's how the Kwani guys came together. It's exactly the same impulse, right? The only difference is that they were living in a time where political euphoria, funding was there. So they were lucky they kind of got that funding. But they were not very different. If you read Kwani 1, the materials in Kwani 1, a lot of that material feels very underground. Right? Yeah. So long may it live on, I think. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
When you talked about novelizing history, I couldn't help but think about an article I read by Kerry Baraka, I think, and he was talking about something he referred to as the Kenyan literary novel, which kind of captures the political and cultural zeitgeist. And he said that there hasn't been a lot of literary novels which have been produced in Kenya, especially from a whole generation of very talented writers, like you, for instance. And he argued that there is a lack of structure in Kenya that prevents novelists from actually finishing these works. Because, as Peter said, he's been working on a novel for like 8 years. And Iman has talked about multiple drafts, and authors need to eat, live, essentially. For those who have already published the novels, this is to Peter and Iman, have you encountered these challenges due to the lack of structures in the country? And it seems that you overcome them to be able to produce your novels. Like, my question is, if you encountered these problems caused by this lack of structures, how did you deal with them? How did you overcome them? And for any budding authors who want to be novelists, how can you advise them when they encounter this? Thank you.
Santi.
Okay, so, I wrote, when I was studying in Canada and I was studying in the UK. And of course, when it comes to artistic expression, when it comes to creatives, there is a lot more support in those countries. There's a lot more importance placed on the arts. In Kenya, we don't place enough importance, in my opinion, on the arts. So as a writer, it can be very difficult because there is a lack of support, there is a lack of funding. And if you can't write full-time, balancing a job with a novel is extremely difficult. The only advice I can give you is that you just have to keep pushing through it, honestly. If you need a job to survive. Let's be honest, even if you write your first novel, you're probably not going to make any money off it. So I think that passion that you have has to drive you forward. So for me, I do try to write in the mornings, maybe an hour. I rarely, honestly, the past few years, I haven't done it, but it's something I want to do. You spend that time, you keep that time aside for yourself and for your writing. And you don't think of your writing as your second job, you think of your actual job as your second job. Your writing should come first. yeah, that would be my advice to you.
I can say Paul, the biblical Paul, spoke about vocation. He was a tent maker by day. He was a great preacher. So we all have to make our tents and then go preaching. We just need to strike a balance. Because if you're waiting for Zakayo to do structures for you, he tells us arts are useless subjects. So you can imagine how contemptuous he will be of creative writing, leave alone the larger arts. We can say it is that kind of mindset because we are all beneficiaries of fellowships outside this country. It's because those societies know the foundational place of the arts in documenting any society. Not just documenting, but inspiring and recording any human endeavors. So my thinking is that even the most prominent of our authors had a day job. Ngugi is still at University of California at Irvine. I think Gurna, Abdurazak Gurna, was teaching until like 2 years ago, University of Kent.
Yes.
So we all have a day job, and then we write, as Iman says, we write at night. I think that's the only way we can strike a balance. And remember, if our leaders actually read literature, for instance, if Nabi read Tolstoy, a short story called "How Much Land Does a Man Need?" By the way, because it's already well after 100 years, maybe 150 years, it's free on the Creative Commons. You're not violating any copyright. You can download it for free. Tolstoy, 150 years, was saying, this is the absurdity of human greed, because look at this guy and how he lived. But because they haven't read Tolstoy, haven't read Iman, haven't read Kimani, they are going to keep looking for more land, and the structures that you're talking about will be a mirage.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, Peter. I must admit it's dire. And if you think about all the novels that have been produced in Kenya or even in East Africa, and you look at the writers under the circumstances, Peter says, fellowships, residencies, Miles Morland. Peter wrote his novel under a PhD. I have written my novel, which is hopefully coming out next year, by doing a PhD, right? Makumbi, the same. Yvonne is probably unique, and I saw her here, but I think she stepped out to refresh for her next session. She'll probably tell you how that happens. But apart from reading, I think your writers, you need to carefully observe their lives and how they and I liked what you said about treat your day job as your second job and writing as your first job. Otherwise, it's not going to get done. Yeah, but really study the structures within which the writers that you know are working under and see how they do it, because those are, I think, guides. I really want to thank you guys for coming. I think you've been a great audience. I really want to thank these wonderful writers. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing your knowledge and time. Yeah. Thank you.